Great, thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction. And before I want to dive right into the panel, but before we get started, I want to say one thing that's very important. This is not one of those panels that you hear at Aspen and Davos, and then everybody descends from the mountaintops and never talks about it again. This is something, I say this as a journalist, this is something that is actually happening. I think there is a dramatic change going on in the way that companies are being run. The best companies are being run, maybe not every company, but the best companies are being run. And I think it's happening for a number of observable reasons. One of them is information flow. If you go back to when I started my career 100 years ago, as Ursula nicely said, companies were hierarchies. Information flowed up to the top, and the folks at the top would take that information and come up with a plan and directives for everybody else, and that's the way the company was run. Today, information goes everywhere, and the people at the top may be the last people to get it, not the only people to get the full picture. The second piece of it is the change is happening so fast. We did a survey of Fortune 500 CEOs last month. 97% of them said they expect their companies to change more in the next 5 years than they have in the last 5 years. Fastest pace of change they've ever seen. Henry Kravis was at an event we did in November, said he used to ask his portfolio companies to do 5-year strategic plans. Then they changed it to 3-year strategic plans, and now they said, just give us a year, because you cannot see what's happening 3 years or 5 years out. And that means that you can't have a company that is run with directives from the top. And that gets to the third point, which is it takes a different kind of leadership. You have to have a clear vision, you have to have a clear goal, you have to have a clear purpose, and you have to have some rules of the road, the how. The fourth big reason, again, as a reporter, I see is talent, and I'm sure these three will talk about it. The need to bring in people want to work for companies that they think have a noble purpose. And then the fifth we saw in the UK last week, which is the rapidly changing political environment, the disillusion with leadership generally, corporate leadership included. Clearly, we need to do something to rebuild the public trust. You see it in this country, too, in both the Trump campaigns and the Sanders campaign. Something to rebuild trust in business. So that's the big topic that we're going to spend the next 15 minutes talking about. Fortunately, what we have here on stage is three pioneers in leading with purpose, really the very best. Ursula, you've been CEO of Xerox for 10 years?
8.
8 years?
Feels like 10.
Feels like 20 maybe sometimes. And you've always put purpose at the center of your leadership. Tom, you have been at Allstate 10 years.
Yeah, 10 years, that's 70 in dog years.
70 in dog years, and have been a leader in this movement. And Adam, you're a serial entrepreneur, environmentally based businesses, Method, and now Ripple. And you can taste Ripple's pea-based milk over in the tent around the corner. It's pretty good.
It's great.
So,
come on. Unbiased.
It's great.
Unbiased view.
So it's great. I'm just going to take 1 minute before you dive in to run a video, because we've been working with the Aspen Institute on this purpose-based leadership and have been doing a series of interviews of CEOs that I think will demonstrate the point that we're going to be making in this panel. Let's run the video.
To you, what does leading with purpose mean?
We need to aspire to what is our bigger purpose? What is our bigger purpose as an organization?
Fundamentally, a business that isn't doing good for the world will not be successful over the long run.
I think it's hard to make money if you don't do good over time.
Our view is you solve a problem and the profit will come later.
Value today for a customer is not just price. It's your environmental responsibility. It's how you contribute to communities. It's how you treat your employees. And so if we focus on that purpose and broaden our definition of value to all of those elements, I think that's what it means today for Duke Energy.
Okay, more music than words there, but now let's get really concrete, Ursula. Purpose is a vague word, an abstract word. What does it mean when you're running Xerox? How do you make it happen?
I think it's similar to how you should lead your life. running a company, similar to how you should lead your life. One of the things that I learned early, my mother just drummed in me, is that in every interaction you should leave behind more than you take away. And if you run a company, you should approach your customers, your shareholders, your community that you're involved in, your employees that same way. That as you interact with them, as they interact with other people, they should leave behind more than they take away. If you focus on that, if you think about that broadly, money, which is what we've been branded with as the only purpose that exists for corporations, it turns out to be an outcome of a series of good actions, right? A series of purpose-driven actions. And if you can keep your eye on that, I think you can keep a balanced, good company.
So give me a concrete example of in Xerox where you do that.
So the easiest and most, the easiest to explain is how we engage with our employees in the communities that we do business in and we actually live in, as our employees live in. We actually engage, we are in the community, it's our community. So education is very important. The environment is extremely important. Governance and government structures in these communities are very important. So educational institutions are important. So our employees are spread around the world. We have 130,000 of them, spread around the world, living in communities. Giving back sounds kind of odd, right? Because it's like giving back. Living in the communities as participating, value-adding members. And the company, Xerox Corporation, supports that. We more than support it, we expect it. So me as the CEO, I live in Norwalk, I live in New York, I engage in those communities. I serve on university boards, on not-for-profit boards, on for-profit boards, engage very actively in politics because we want better.
And you expect all your employees to do
all
the
of
same.
them, and particularly the leadership team.
Tom.
We do it a number of ways. First, we decide, what the purpose of the company is. And that's sort of, broad brush, hard to argue with that. But then we go all the way down to the individual and we help them figure out their purpose. So we've helped 20,000 Allstate employees and agency owners figure out what their personal purpose was. And then we build middleware in between it.
What does that mean? You help 20,000 Allstate employees figure out what their personal purpose is?
We have a day to day and a half long program. You do a bunch of work on physical stuff. You get 360s from your family, your friends, your kids. And then you take all that information and you write down your current story, extrapolate it into the future in a positive way. Then you write down your purpose and then you build a plan on it. And it's all about their life. It's not about doing better performance management or anything else. We said make it about your life. If you're working for us because you want to be able to pay for your kids to go to college, then put that down as your purpose. Be focused on it. And so we do the personal purpose, company purpose, and then we build middleware in between, which is how we talk about it. So we have things like 22nd Century Company, which is middleware helping them explain that incredibly vague purpose-driven thing. And then all the way down to what we do in the communities with like youth empowerment.
It sounds like you're spending a fair amount of time on this, time away from the core job.
Yeah, I think it is a core job. I mean, I don't know what Ursula and Adam said, but it is the job. I think the job of a leader is to get others to willingly go where they would not go by themselves. So it's pretty easy as a leader to get people where they want to go. Like if you're in a parade and you're heading the parade and everybody knows you're marching down Main Street, that's not too hard. And so if you get them to willingly go where they would not go by themselves, and that's, not everybody, the purpose thing's not for everybody. So we say, like, that's okay. Eventually, we think you won't come to work for us if you're not purpose-driven.
So, Adam, on the flight in this morning, I read your book, The Method.
Thank you.
Yes, I did. I enjoyed it. But there was a reference early on to big, soulless corporations. You think Xerox and Allstate qualify as big, soulless corporations?
No. It's good for selling books, though. And we weren't talking about these guys. We were talking about the soap companies.
Oh, the soap companies. Okay, but talk about what purpose means at the startups you run.
Yeah, purpose for me means creating shared prosperity. I think that business is the largest and most powerful institution on the planet, and it has not only the opportunity, but I believe the onus to create social and environmental benefit through business, in addition to
By the way, you also quoted Gordon Gekko. Greed is good.
Yeah, and the point of that in the book actually was, and this is very core to my philosophy of business, is I actually think that in a lot of ways, the environmental movement and the sustainable business movement has got it all wrong. Because they try to convince people to buy their products because they're the more sustainable versions of what you actually like. And why I think the greed is good quote was about, we've got to make products that are awesome first, for all of the reasons that products are awesome, which a cleaning product would be that it cleans well and smells nice, and a non-dairy milk would be that it's high in protein and low in sugar and tastes really great.
And not more expensive.
And not more expensive, right. And I think that I was on a panel earlier today, and I talked about, I like to focus on not the 4% of consumers that are the quote-unquote green consumers. I think it's pointless to make green products for green people. You've got to focus on the other 96% of people, and that means creating products that are great first, where the sustainability is built in. And so as that relates to purpose for us, I think that the purpose of business should be to create shared prosperity. If you just take a moment to think about the current world that we're living in right now, you recognize that capitalism in business is amazingly efficient at creating wealth and creating economic outcomes. It's also really good at widening income distribution gaps. And we're living some of the civil and political consequences of that right now. I believe we need a new model of business. And actually, we've adopted this both at Method, my previous business, and Ripple Foods now, which is the benefit corporation corporate form.
Ripple is a B Corp.
Ripple's a B Corp. Method was a founding B Corp, one of the first 15 companies.
Have either of you looked at the B Corp option? I'll bet you'd do just about anything to get rid of some of your shareholders right now, Ursula.
Actually, not so. Not so.
Really? You've had Carl Icahn knocking on your door.
Actually, really nice man.
Yeah,
pretty nice man.
But does he? If you're aiming for purpose and you have an investor,
no interference whatsoever. This is interesting. I get as much interference from Carl Icahn as I do from one of the top funds that own my company. I mean, there's no difference. The difference is the consistency of the message. The good news about Mr. Icahn is his message is fairly consistent.
You know what he's going to say.
Yeah, I know what he's going to say. Companies are not these soulless people. Whenever I go to Washington, I hear this, is that the corporations are X, Y, Z. I keep asking, what are those things? Those things are us. We actually work at them, big ones or small ones, right? So it's made up of people. People generally don't lose their souls when they walk into a building. They actually have connections back to family, as you say. They have goals, they have desires, they have things that they love. And the whole secret here, from investor all the way down to employee, is to figure out a way to actually amplify the good stuff there, not to minimize it. It's not only about making money. Can you believe that? It's not only about making money.
Will your shareholders buy into that?
Absolutely. By the way, if they didn't, they would say, your philanthropy, we have a big philanthropy organization, do away with that. They would say matching of anything that we do, good health care, literally list the things that we do as a major American.
So you see no conflict between the short-term pressures that come from your shareholders and your leading with purpose?
None. Now, I think that there is a way that you can deal with this noise. If you deal with it poorly, you will translate that poor dealing with it into short-term actions that are stupid. But if you deal with it over a long amount of time, because people scream about all kinds of things all the time, you will actually be able to build an organization, which Xerox has, not me, but I actually now run it, that actually can do all things at the same time. We can actually engage employees who want to come work here. Choice is a big deal. Engage communities that we actually live and work in. We can engage other companies to do business with us, engage the government, engage activists, shareholders, et cetera. It's not always easy or perfect. It's not always great, but we don't always listen to the noise.
Have you ever studied the B Corp model as a possible way to go, or is it?
No. I've studied the B Corp model, but never as a possible way to go.
Yeah, I looked at it, and I thought it was interesting. I didn't think it went far enough. I mean, it's more validation, and it's like checking some boxes. Nothing wrong with it, if you choose to do it, but I didn't think it actually. I thought you could just do more good by just doing things. So, and I agree with Ursula. I think it's about talking to your shareholders, talking to your employees, building a business model, having the guts to actually stand out there. But I think corporations served a purpose which needed it to be sort of cold, heartless, after we had to rebuild after World War II, after a couple of wars, and we had to move technology around the world, we had global capital markets, all that stuff needed to be done, and you needed somebody to do it because there's no sovereign state to do it, so somebody had to do it. And we got those attributes because that's what needed to happen. That's not what needs to happen in the future. And I think one of the things we keep hanging on is, so on the underlying assumption embedded in the question is that Milton Friedman was right, and he wasn't. He said there should be, corporation do one and only one thing, that's make money for their shareholders, right? And he said if you give money from a charity standpoint, that's a waste of money. And I just think that's wrong. I mean, it might have been wrong in 1970, but it is completely wrong today. Our shareholders get it, our customers get it, our employees get it. And I think we just have to be willing to ditch that and say, bright guy, you know.
He was wrong.
You know, but you know, he's never in doubt, occasionally wrong. He was
But there's clarity in having only one goal. I mean, there must be moments, Adam, of trade-off between purpose and profit. For instance, if every big food company said, we're going to make pea milk, you would have accomplished your purpose, but you probably wouldn't make a lot of money.
Well, that's not necessarily true. And yes, there are trade-offs. I'll talk about those in a second. Listen, Method is the largest green cleaning company in the world. We have only 500 employees. Okay, Ripple Foods currently has about 20. Okay, so our impact alone is not that big. Right. Yeah. So, but the role we play in our categories is we catalyze our competitors to actually follow us, and this happened with Method in the laundry detergent category. I'll spare you the details of the story, but we were the very first to come out with an ultra-concentrated laundry detergent, much more sustainable, and we forced industry to follow us because we got our customers to see how that would be allowed.
And what did that do to your profits?
It actually made them better because it created a license to go further and design the next innovation.
You just had to be ahead of everyone else.
Yeah. I mean, and my businesses are very built around continually innovating as opposed to try to build a patent fortress in milk, right?
So where are the trade-offs?
So I think I want to say a couple of things about trade-offs. First of all, if you hold the perception that doing well by society and environment will always be a negative on your financial bottom line, like just go home, right? Or just do the Milton Friedman thing and go for it, okay? I can articulate several examples of how investing in environmental and social infrastructure within our businesses actually has helped to the bottom line. But your question was about trade-offs, and there are some. I'll give you one example. So all of the plastic that Method and Ripple Foods uses to package our products is 100% post-consumer recycled material. We don't use any virgin material. Okay, that is about a 75% reduction in the cost of of the carbon footprint. It's a small premium in cost. Okay, so we do pay for that. Okay, that is a trade-off right there.
And you don't get it back from the consumer?
No, we don't. Consumers aren't going to pay more for recycled packaging, and they shouldn't, by the way. But here's the thing. In 2011, when you had a run-up of oil prices went above $100 a barrel. Every other one of our competitors had to raise their price because of because of how exposed they were to commodity cost risk. We held our price, and we gained market share in that scenario. Now, we're on the opposite side of that situation, right? No, it's not. It's actually de-risking the business by insulating yourself against commodity cost risk. And I would argue that those gains that we made in market share far outweighed the very tiny premium that we pay for that material.
Ursula, trade-offs?
Often, always.
Yeah, so talk about them. How do you deal with the trade-offs?
I mean, I call it life. I mean, we make decisions all the time in life, and we make a decision that we are going to print something really silly on two-sided. We invented two-sided copying. One of the stupidest decisions in the world, if you think about it, if all you're interested in is profits, because if you didn't invent it, you could actually run twice the number of pages through, and so on and so forth. But it became it is almost like competing with yourself. It's preparing yourself, making yourself more resilient for what will eventually happen. Somebody's going to figure it out. So the way that we think about it is, while you have a short-term, you may create a short-term dislocation because of some great trade-off that you're making in the short term. It protects you, very much what you said, it protects you against the long term. Good ideas are not only coming out of Xerox Corporation. They're coming out of a lot of different places. When we think about choosing to invest here versus flow it all to the bottom line, we get this all the time from investors. You spend $800 million in R&D. What the hell? You know, why the hell do that? Why don't you just copy somebody else's thing? Yeah, you can do that. And what you have to do is prepare yourself for the long term. It's not a short-term game. You prepare yourself for the long term. Plus, it makes it a little bit more fun. I mean, it really does. It would be, one of the things that Tom said that was interesting was, think about the fact that today people have choices. You can actually go work somewhere else. You don't have to work for me. You can work for Allstate. You can work for Ripple Foods or Method. And so we have to actually create an environment that people want to come to. And part of it is giving them exciting things to do. That costs more money than giving them drudgery.
I have to say, in the interviews I do, that's the #1 reason I hear from people about why purpose is so important. That particularly today, particularly young people want to work at a place that they feel is doing good in the world.
I haven't met one that doesn't.
Old people either, by the way.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's just young people. I mean, we all seen these stats where, like, what is it, like 10 to 20% of your employees are actively disengaged on a daily basis. So, like, makes you want to throw up. You're like, oh my gosh. And so, if you can find a way to reduce that number, it's worth a ton of money.
Do you survey engagement of your employees?
We do, yeah, and we're always on 22 of 24. We're in the top quartile to decile on those, and it's a whole variety of things you do.
It comes and goes, and it depends on the moods of the investor base. Yeah. Depends on what they hear in the newspapers. Yeah. It depends on a lot of things, a lot of noise. But the cadence has to be pretty continuous about what our core function and focus is, and where they should be focusing their energy, and that's what we do.
Well, let's talk about you talk about the newspapers, really the political environment. I mean, this has been a pretty extraordinary year. No one thought, even 2 years ago, that we would ever end up in a situation where a self-described socialist would be making a serious run for the Democratic nomination, one in more than 20 states, and that the so-called party of business would have a candidate who spent an amazing amount of time attacking companies like Ford for outsourcing, wants to put up walls at the border. Part of what's going on there clearly is a lack of confidence and trust in business. Why is that happening?
I think there's a lack of trust in the world. Yeah, I mean, I was looking back at something from 2010 we did down at the King Center, and we were talking about the trust deficit. And nobody likes it. Nobody believes in anybody, whether it's politicians, business people. I think as business people, we just have to get over it. We just have to ignore them. And we don't have to quit saying they're all dopes and the government doesn't want to do anything right, and quit whining about everything and just move on. I think the government officials have to quit using us every time they screw something up to blame it on us, and just, at least acknowledge that businesses do some good things. I mean, it seems to be one of the few things
But it's pretty hard to ignore, as Ursula says, if your employees are reading it in the newspaper, if it's, I don't know how you can ignore it. I mean, big companies need the trust of the public to survive and thrive.
I agree with that. I think, and I do, there's a portion of your energy that has to go to ignoring it. Believe it or not, literally actively not listening to some of the stuff because you just go crazy. But I think we're at a point in the world, this is not only about business. I agree so much with you. It's not only about business, it's not about the government. It is about an overabundance of information with an underabundance of education. And I mean broad education, of understanding, of literally, I say all the time, if you're gonna vote, you should actually understand what the hell you're voting for. If you're gonna vote, you should read, you should understand. So one of the things that we actually engage our employees on, but also the broader population that we actually live with, is teaching them about trade, teaching them about responsibilities of business people, about responsibilities of government, responsibilities of individuals. Right now, it's unfortunate that we can't outrun, the news that is just, everywhere you go, there's some little tidbit of misfact or misstatement.
If I went to your employees and said, was the North American Free Trade Agreement good for the United States? Or
they would almost overwhelmingly say yes.
They would. If I went to your employees and said, is immigration a good thing or a bad thing?
They would almost surely overwhelmingly say yes.
And you clearly feel a certain responsibility for that.
Absolutely. But by the way, it's not somebody can actually teach them something different too. I mean, but fortunately, I have them captive for a whole bunch of hours every day, and we can, we can actually teach them something. But if not, then it looks like,
Tom, you were going to say something.
I don't know that our employees would know about like TPP and stuff. It may not be as important to our business. What we spend a bunch of time talking about is that a business has a responsibility to do social good, and they need to use their resources to try to do that. It'll help them, and because we'll say like, if you're waiting for the government to fix it, you'll be waiting a long time. Nonprofits don't have enough money, don't have enough leadership, they're struggling. So we need to pitch in. And so what we do is we have a different angle. We try to educate them on what we think a corporation should do, which is do good.
I think we need to go further than that, actually. I think we need to literally redefine success in business, to have a model that is one that and when I say shared prosperity, I don't necessarily mean money, but I do mean prosperity of people's lives. Huh?
What does that mean?
Well, money is part of it. Shared prosperity can mean access to clean water and clean air. Shared prosperity can mean access to basic healthcare services. It can mean access to the ability to save for one's future, which of course is a financial thing.
So are you doing that for your employees, for your customers, for your?
Well, it depends on which one of those things you're talking about. So the environmental aspects of clean air and clean water are things that all of our consumers of our products, and actually all of you, even if you don't consume our products, enjoy in a small way. Obviously, saving for retirement, that's something that's specific to our employees. But also I think that...
You think the current model's broken?
I do, and that's why I would respectfully disagree with Tom on the B Corp point. Let me make sure that I make this point, which is as a benefit corp in the state of Delaware, which both Method and Ripple Foods are, we have literally changed our corporate charter and broadened fiduciary duty, and it is now as a director of that company, CEO, I am obligated not only to make money for my shareholders, but also to do good for society and the environment. And if any of you are one of my shareholders and you don't think I'm holding up my end of the bargain on an environmental standpoint, you can sue me. That is not true of a traditional model of business. And it is not at the expense of the financial. It is solving for all three of those things together. I think that we need that because businesses go through changes, and always businesses have financial pressures, and we need to make sure that we're maintaining what defining the success of business is through all of it.
But I think you have to do everything your shareholders ask you to do.
Yeah, right.
No,
like,
but the point, I think Adam's...
If I get fired because I put $5 million into anti-violence in Chicago, that's the least thing I'm going to get fired for. We got a $79 billion portfolio. We got a lot of other stuff I could mess up.
But I think the question is,
no one's going to care about.
I think the question is this: is there a system problem? In other words, you're doing a great job running Allstate with purpose. You're doing a great job running Xerox with purpose. I suspect the fact you're here means you are not the average CEO. Is there an incentive problem, a system problem that needs to be fixed so we get more of you, Tom, and more of you, Ursula?
I think it's not as big a problem. And first of all, I don't think the problem is necessarily rooted with corporations. This is an interesting conversation. By the way, great. I love it.
They gave us
big shoulders, but we have an everything problem right now. And I really mean that. We have a government problem. We have an individual problem. We have institutions like churches and not-for-profits who we have to kind of band together. You can't just look at us and say, look at me and say, oh, Xerox can do X, Y, Z. We need to band together. Think about education. We have very little to do with this problem, right? But we are one of the core contributors to fixing the problem. I just think we have to all kind of do our thing. There's B Corps, there's C Corps, there's S Corps, there's not-for-profits, there's educational institutions. Let us do our thing together with some clear understanding that.
How do you make that happen?
Yeah, by the way, there used to be this way that we kind of all came together. I'm looking for it. Well, that's one of the reasons why I'm here.
Reform would help.
Something that helps us to get together.
Well, you could go back. Since this Ideas Fest, I'll just throw it out there. You could go back. Corporations were basically the way in the 1500s started with the way governments would outsource stuff to corporations. They would give them a charter, oftentimes a monopoly, and it came with it, Alan, responsibilities. Some broader, some the ones Adam's talking about. And we kind of morphed into this economic corporation. But like Harvard, I think is probably still a corporation. I know Dartmouth was at one time. So they were created. So you could have the government, rather than trying to fix everything themselves, create a monopoly in some city for education, give it to somebody for 15 or 20 years and say, go to town. They could have shareholders come in. They could want to do what Adam wants to do and let them do the work. As opposed, maybe we could use the entity for what it used to be used for, not just what it's used for today.
Front page of the New York Times 2 days ago, big story on how private equity firms have taken over ambulance services in cities around the country, and horrible things have happened, and oh, isn't this awful?
Well, I mean, did they have a corporate charter, or did they just buy an economic entity which had no other obligation?
But so now you're talking about systemic fix. You're now speaking Adam's language. You're talking about systemic.
No, for
fix.
certain,
I think
for certain core services, yes. I mean, for certain things you can't. It's water authority. There's certain things that make a nation, right? That make a nation. Those things, all of us contribute in, and we actually put somebody in charge who's a server for that. If you have the water authority, the freaking road authority, the border authority, the ambulance authority, and you say, I'm going to prisons, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this a for-profit organization, the outcome will be very clear. For-profit. You did not broaden the charter at all. You said what you have to do is deliver excellent service, reduce the population of X, get to, whatever it is, do that, and mix it up. Yeah, it has to be in the charter.
But that's a little like the B Corp charter.
Yeah, a different charter.
And by the way, there are many things that are like B Corp charters, right? I mean, some companies are like that, but there are other services.
But you don't have to be a B Corp to do good.
To do that, that's right. You don't.
Like, you
by the
can
way,
just do what you want to do.
And we get into this debate. It's a crazy debate that says, well, we gave the prison systems to for-profit entities, and we are surprised that they're making profit. No?
All right, I'm going to open it up for questions in just a minute, but I want to ask each of you. There's one thing I want from each of you before we do that. And Tom, first of all, I'm not sure everyone in here was in here for the previous session, but that was something sponsored by Allstate and that's illustrative of the work you do in the community. Could you just take a minute to talk about your Get in Chicago? You've got three or four of them that are quickly.
Yeah, maybe I'll talk about the most rather than all of them. Youth empowerment, we're big on trying to help youth get their voice, and that's because we believe historically youth have changed most of the things in the world, right? Before Rosa Parks was Claudette Colvin. She was 15. She got arrested 9 months before Rosa Parks did. Vietnam War, good on the list. And so what we're trying to do is empower youth to have them be able to use their voices. We do it through things like 150 different programs. The biggest one we have is something called We Schools. They do volunteer service-based work in schools. We brought it to Illinois last year with help from Terry and some other people. 100,000 kids doing volunteer work. 16,000 of them get celebrated in all-day, basically rock concert kind of format. It's the funnest thing I do. If you're ever feeling down about America, go listen to 16,000 screaming teenagers. Be thrilled when they're hearing from some world leader about how they should give back. It just
and someday they'll buy Allstate insurance, and that's fine.
Yeah, or they'll make the world better. And we're a net investor in the world, so it's okay.
They can do either one. Ursula, you were the first female African-American CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Are you the only? You're still the only. You have made it a point, particularly women in technology, minorities in technology. You've made that a mission during your time as CEO. Do you feel like you're making progress?
A little bit, slowly. And fortunately, it's not me alone. I think that this problem has been adopted, first of all, realized, recognized, and now adopted by a lot more people than just me. We are leaving behind a huge swath of the population in this country. You don't have to go far. Maybe not in Aspen, but somewhere around here, I guarantee you. Women, disproportionately, underrepresented minorities, and the combination of those two things, it's amazing. Literally, it cannot be roulette. The way that I made it to where I am is I had a great mother, and I happened to like the right subject. Happened to like it.
And you're good.
I was pretty good, but I mean, I tell you what, as Tom said, go to these kids. We sponsor FIRST and NAF and
They're
all
good
these
kids out there.
Yeah, they're not, and they're not. You don't have to kind of dig to find them. You don't have to dig to find them. We just don't have enough energy focused on them, and we don't value their ideas and their input and how their life should be run. And that's the second. And the third is we are totally devoid of any discipline and expectations. Discipline and expectations and a voice and access solves most problems. These kids are smart. They should have a chance. And we're leaving them behind. And I say this all the time.
You're going to keep working on it? You have, Xerox is splitting into two. You've said you won't run either company.
Won't run either company.
So what are you going to do?
Well, I'll be the chairman of one, hopefully for only a short amount of time. And then I'm going to go off into world number 2, which I spend quite a bit of time today on education and inequality. This idea that we have unevenness around the world, that some unevenness is good, but we have such a stark level of unevenness. We're creating lack of safety. And so I'm going to work on this. This is the goal is on.
It's a good thing.
Can I
The
just
world
say
is
something
fortunate.
about Ursula? First, she's obviously an amazing woman. But I think it's unfair to say that the burden is all hers to fix this problem. I'm kind of like, look, I did this thing with one of my daughters the other day, and somebody was talking about it. I said, look, well, I had great parents. I went to the right schools, and I'm white, and I'm a male. I worked pretty hard. I think I deserved my job, but being white and a male didn't hurt. And what that means is I have an obligation as much as Ursula has an obligation to try to help other people get up there, because what we want is talent to make the world better. So I think it's great you're doing it, but I think all of us have that same obligation. And just acknowledging that you've benefited to where you're at today is freeing to some of these kids, because they think you don't believe it. And they think you don't believe them.
One thing I'll add on, what's interesting about this problem is that it's not really that hard to get engaged and start to fix. But most people just don't do it. Just going to a school, and this is not blame, but I want everybody in this room to feel a little uneasy. You should go to a school. Just spend a little bit of time with a student. You will find, by the way, go to a bad school. These quote unquote bad schools. You will see that even if these guys had the brightest stars in their eyes, they don't have the infrastructure, the teachers, the food, to be successful.
You're saying one person can make a difference.
One person can make a difference.
Adam, we'll open up the questions after this, but you are on a mission to get us all to eat plant-based foods.
More plant-based foods. Yeah.
Why? I like my meat.
Yeah.
So what are you after here?
Climate change is the greatest threat to not only, I think, our civilization, but our economic vitality. And we have to fix that problem. And one of the
How important is food in it?
Food is, the reason I'm working in food is because I think between food and energy, that's the problem, right? Those two things, and by the way, those two things are connected. The reason I'm doing what I'm doing is a lot of plant-based foods are not delicious. And if they're not delicious, then we're going to keep eating meat. Meat is delicious, right? And we're going to keep eating that stuff.
Milk's not bad either.
Yeah, milk's great, right? But we need more sustainable versions of foods that are delicious, that people want to eat because they're delicious. And if we do that, not just me, but even some of the other guys out there doing the burgers and stuff, then it's going to start to show people that eating in a way that is better for our long-term shared prosperity is actually something we enjoy.
Questions? Start with this woman right here, please. Wait for the microphone. They're rushing to get to you. You're going to have 3 of them if you sit there long enough there. And identify yourself before you ask your question.
Catherine Phillips. And there's a lot of moaning now that the best students coming out of our colleges want to all be entrepreneurs and do startups. They don't want to go to the big companies because they don't see the big companies as being purpose-driven and entrepreneurial. And are you finding this to be true? And how are you dealing with the fact that you actually want these people to come into the company and realize your companies are purpose-driven?
I'll start. You're a little bit entrepreneur, so you will be on the other side of the fence, I guess.
He thinks you're soulless.
I
actually don't. We often see the opposite side of that equation, right? Which is there's a lot of security and career development that comes with a large company. We can't provide it.
Yeah,
You know?
I think that we see, it's interesting, I'm on the board of 2 very large companies, and I run a very large company, and we don't have a problem. There are students, I mean, obviously we have a problem hiring people because there's everybody trying to get the great ones, but we get our fair share just fine. Purpose is important, and it doesn't, a lot of people want to be entrepreneurs, and they go off and do that. A large number of people want to engage in technology development, and our company allows them to do that. So it's not, how do you say it? It's made popular by a big voice. Everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, but there are as many people who want to go to American Express or ExxonMobil or Allstate or Xerox, and we hire them just fine, of all different makes and models, marketing, finance, engineering.
Yeah,
it's pretty good.
Yeah, we don't have an issue. We think of it, treat them as customers, not as supplicants.
Yeah.
And so if you create a value proposition, includes things like purpose, but for ours, like for the young people, we have this thing called Leadership Development Program. 3 years, you know, you get
Rotate
5
around.
to 10 years worth of experience, 3 different jobs. So it's just about treating them as customers, about thinking about them not as just somebody to do a job, here's the money, treating them differently.
Right here and then right here. Yeah, right there in the middle. This woman right there, yes, please, and identify yourself. And then can you bring this mic up to the front to this gentleman?
Hi, I'm Catherine Wilkinson from Atlanta. So I worked in purpose consulting for a number of years, which I think is probably evidence of the trend that's happening, that companies are now paying for people to come in and help them figure out their purpose and how to bring it to life. But what I realized during that time was everyone's claiming purpose. Right? Everyone says they're doing purpose. And when you scratch the surface of purpose, it's often just CSR or marketing. It is very rarely actually integrated into a core business model or even any business model within the company in any way. So B Corp, I think, is important because it's actually putting metrics around what's real and what's not real when it comes to purpose. So if you're not using something like B Corp to determine what's in and what's out, how do you know whether purpose is real?
How do we know it's real?
Yeah.
For us, it's pretty straightforward, and I'm a big focus in our company, two things. It's sustainability and education. And so it's really easy to track. By the way, sometimes very depressing, but very easy to track how much of an impact we have when a school, a series of schools, a class of students, et cetera, and we literally do track it. We started an organization when President Obama became president. That's called Change the Equation. We didn't start it. He asked a whole bunch of companies to do it to get to this point. Companies are throwing hundreds of millions, billions of dollars at education today. It's amazing. Around the world, generally US companies, with no metrics or measures about whether that's actually coming out to any purpose. And if you look at graduation rates or accomplishment rates or achievement rates, we're wasting our money, right? Because literally the numbers are not moving. So what we tried to do is exactly what you said. How do we actually tie this money that we're all spending that was first started to make us feel good? Second came, we were running out of workers, so we just needed to actually start to fund our own feed corn and try to get to the point where we can work on things that we know actually have results that are real. Take your name off of it. I don't care if it's Xerox's thing or Allstate's thing. If Allstate has something that works, we'll copy it. So literally, it is tracking, exactly as you said. It's not just making us feel good. We could stop education in a minute. The cycle is so damn long that I will be retired before I can figure out whether the kids that we started working on 8 years ago are going to be worthwhile. But we track them, and I won't benefit immediately, but we track them in every single grade to make sure that we're making progress. It's not always great, but it's tying it to
And I heard something in your question other than just the corporate form. Maybe, Alan, to your earlier point, is it like do we need to change the model and stuff? I think businesses give away a ton of money. Sometimes just writing checks. I think that the next phase here will be getting it embedded into your organization and having your employees do that work, giving them time off, and that I think we do need to change. And I think people are doing it differently. Like we found it in domestic violence. We got into domestic violence. We didn't know anything about it. And we said we just knew no one else was doing anything. And then we figured out money was a weapon of choice. And we said, hey, yeah, we know something about money. Like, we don't know much about all this other stuff. So we have now taught our employees and agency owners, financial specialists, have taught like 500,000 women on how to balance a checkbook so they can get out of a bad relationship. So I think it's changing from just writing a check.
But writing a check is not bad, though, by the way.
Yeah,
I mean,
I want to, but before we leave this question, Adam, I want you to talk about it, because one of the best books I've read in the past year was a book called Disrupted by Dan Lyons, who spent a year working for a startup in Massachusetts, where they talked about how they had all these young people working for them, who would change the world, change the world, change the world, and basically they were spamming people with emails. But they had everybody convinced that they were changing the world. I mean, there's a fair amount of this talking a good game but not doing it in the startup world too.
Yeah, I think it's totally overdone, actually. My approach is that we need to be ambitious about what we're trying to do with the purpose of business, but we need to also be humble about the effects that we're actually having and the negative effects that every business has. I mean, there are a lot of businesses that are talking a really good game, but Method, Ripple Foods, we have negative impacts that we are trying to get rid of. In addition to, well, we create greenhouse gases. Would be a great example, right? We do it a lot less than other people, but to the question that's been asked, I mean, I think that nothing, to me, just sort of irks me more than when you hear a corporation say, well, we're going to reduce the CSR report, we reduced our greenhouse gas emissions 15% over where we were like 10 years ago. Which is, I mean, what does that mean, right? What does that mean? How bad were you 15 years ago, right? We actually need to get to a place where we're using hard and absolute metrics for things like carbon, water, waste. And when we do that, and it's starting to happen, and we're transparent about that with our companies, then the wheat will be separated from the chaff in terms of who's a real sustainable business and who's not.
Go ahead.
Great panel. I'm Eric Beinhocker from Oxford University. When you look at the longer-term history of business, you actually realize that this primacy of shareholder value and focus on this actually a relatively recent phenomenon, started in the late 70s, 80s. If you look back to the earlier era, the post-war era, when great middle class was created, business boomed, and you asked the CEO then what was their purpose, they would have said, to use your words, Adam, make awesome products and services. That was the purpose of a company. And shareholders weren't unimportant. You had to deliver an adequate return in order to allow you to make awesome products and services. But if that's the purpose, then to do that, you have to treat your employees well, you have to treat your customers well, you have to treat your community well, you have to invest for the long term. And the set of things that follow from that purpose are very constructive. So I wonder, whether a way to square this circle is to almost go back to, Leave It to Beaver era capitalism, where the economy did well and companies did well, and there was a longer term perspective on things.
And Ward Cleaver got up every morning and read a newspaper. Wasn't that nice? Yeah.
Or a magazine.
Or a magazine.
I think it would be great, but I don't think it's going to happen the way that, the world's changed.
Yeah.
It's smaller, the competition, it's just, the world's changed. I think we can get to the same end with definitely different rhetoric, with a rhetoric more contemporary, and with a broader set of approaches. I don't think we're going to ever go back to that era, but I think we don't have to drift that far from it. We've actually become a monolith in communications. By the way, much less CEOs and businesses than investors. Right? The people who, we don't, I tell you what, I'd love to get up on every quarter and say, let me tell you what I did in the community last quarter.
They don't ask you that.
They don't want to hear it. So, the community that invests is the people who have to actually start to change the conversation as well.
And I think it's just about taking risks too. Like as a CEO, just, you got to make the numbers, you got to deliver the value.
Don't give a damn sometimes.
But this doesn't have to get in the way.
Yeah,
it's not an either or.
Question right here. There's a microphone right behind you, and then this woman 2 tables behind you.
Hi, it's Jason Saul from Chicago. I had a question just about the metrics, because I actually don't think it matters how much we're measuring things. And to be honest with you, the B Corp stuff, if anyone's actually looked at the assessment, is fairly simplistic. It's, do you recycle? Do your employees get time off? Do you have underrepresented people in your business? Do you give money to charity? Basically any company can pass a checklist. Most of the research shows that. So my question to you is, if most of the metrics we're looking at about big business is proving whether or not we've made the world marginally less worse by recycling and doing some perfunctory things, what should be the metrics of how we judge whether a company is good from your perspectives?
I can start. I guess I'm starting all the time. I think that it's a mix of things, and I tried to say it when I started, which is, do you leave behind more than you take away? It's a strange way to think about it, but I think it's a good way to think about it. So we serve clients in business process outsourcing, and one of the things that we want them to do is spend less time thinking about that crap, right? So if I can actually have them spend less, not know anything about that crap, that I think I'm leaving behind more than I did. It's that kind of simplistic stuff. It's not too, it's not calculus, it's arithmetic. It's basic, simple things, and sometimes it's just feeling better about it. Make a little bit of money, not a lot of people quit. You know, everybody who tried to hire stayed, you got some more customers, everything is good that quarter. It's not that mathematical or that complicated.
Business should create financial, social, and environmental benefit, period. And if you think about business today, most don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Most don't do that.
Yeah, I just don't agree with that. I mean, I think businesses, look at the strength of the American economy. We have capital markets that every other country in the world would love to have. We have thousands of business that employ hundreds of millions of people every day. They spit out good products. We get all kinds of stuff
How's
here.
that mutually
It's innovation,
exclusive from social
and we have a
environmental
$14 trillion. So I'm just saying, like what I heard might not be what you said was we're not doing it. I think the first thing is just acknowledge that we're doing a pretty good job. American business is not broken.
I agree.
There might, and so now, are we perfect? No. Do we have to change to get into the 22nd century?
Atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide is higher than it's been in the last 2 million years in all of human civilization. You cannot say that we are doing a good job environmentally. It cannot be so.
Nor can you say that that's all caused by business.
No,
I'm sorry.
but business caused most of it. So I think we have a responsibility to solve that problem. I just think that's an uninformed
How about 7 billion people in the world now and not a way to actually sustain them? How to,
How about
et cetera,
China?
et cetera,
So
et
we
cetera,
need to
et
lead.
cetera,
That's
et
my
cetera.
point.
How about China? I think we're talking about U.S. business. U.S. business is really strong. I think these people who are saying, it's one of the few strong pillars we have in America. Compare it to our education system.
Political system?
Who's doing better? Our political system, who's doing better? I'm not saying we should have blinders on that. I'm just saying it's not that bad. Now, is there a huge amount of change in the world?
That's why you're in business, because you think you can do more good in business
then
than
it's
you
good.
can in nonprofit
We
or
have to
government.
do better than business as usual is my point.
Yeah, we're arguing about a non-problem here. It's a huge problem that's a non-problem, meaning
I think
the
business
world
is a solution.
I agree with you. That's what I'm saying.
So
We're
does
on
that.
the we're on the end. This, by the way, if there is a better way to do it, I don't wake up in the morning and say I'm going to be an ogre. I'm going to actually use more carbon monoxide, pay people less, and steal from the. That's not what I do. We wake up to try to do just the opposite, and whoever can help us do that, I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to listen. So I'm sure you are as well. So if there are people who can help us figure out a way to spend less, to use, got it.
Do I think that we have a terrible environment? Absolutely. Do I think we've let businesses use the environment for free when they should have been charged for it? Absolutely. Do I think that's right? No. But I don't necessarily think that means businesses is broken today.
is evil.
Right? I think business could help fix it, Adam.
My goodness, if
I
they
agree
were
with that.
broken, we'd be in trouble.
I agree.
My question is in the vein more of arithmetic than it is calculus, which is how do you reflect as a leader the way you nurture your purpose?
How do I reflect as a leader? I think.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Can you reflect in that
I mean, how
question?
do you lead by example in nurturing your
thank you.
purpose?
Thank
How
you.
do you
Got
reflect
it.
to
Thank you.
others?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I got it. You want to go first? I always go first. Come on, Tom.
All right. I talk about it and I do it. So I'm always out talking to our employees. I'm talking about our purpose. We train I encourage all of our employees to do our Energy for Life program I talk about, and then the youth empowerment stuff, I get out to do it. I was in New York last week. I spent half a day soliciting people to try to get them to give us money to bring We Schools to New York. So you just do it. And people notice.
I would say the same. It's just, I am who I am. I have things that I believe in. I speak about them if God's in the room, if God's not in the room. I am very frank and open to my employees, to the people who work in our company, about what I believe in, and I try to lead by example. Now, it's not always popular, but
we haven't talked about that, but transparency, I know, Ursula, that's critical to you. I saw it in your book as one of your obsessions, I think. Transparency is an important part of this puzzle.
Huge.
Well, yeah, I mean, we live in a world now where you can't not be transparent. The information is there. So I think if you're not transparent about what you're doing and you're not being totally honest about what you're doing,
it'll come out.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I don't think you have a choice. I think there are some businesses that understand that better than others.
Yeah, I agree with you. But I think you have a choice to not be transparent. You can be opaque. And by the way, that
is not you.
My point is, if you have a bully pulpit, which I happen to have, I happen to be this crazy yes person who happens to be black and a woman and run a company. Okay, so that for some reason is odd, and that gives you a chance. It gives me a chance to actually sit on the stage and talk to you. So when people ask, they say to me all the time, "You're so authentic." I say, "What does that mean exactly?" There's certain things I try to do a little bit of research so I have some foundation in facts. So I'm not making things up. I form an opinion, and then I actually. That opinion goes rooted into things I believe, and then I go for it. And that's the way that I live. That's the way that you move forward. It's trouble sometimes, but most of the time it's not.
It means you're not a BSer.
Yeah, is that what it means?
Yeah, I think so.
We have a lot of questions left. I'm being told we're out of time, and I'm feeling very,
Do one more.
very. Take control.
Do one more. Take control.
Do it the way Ursula would just take control. Okay, this woman right here, and then this woman here, and then that gentleman there. And then we really have to cut it off, so be quick.
Okay, hi, my name is Ellen, and I applaud all of you. I think the world's a better place for leaders like you. You're very socially conscious. Thank you. I had your juice outside every day. I've been tweeting. It's awesome. And the purpose behind it is fabulous. Ursula, you speak my language. Education is where it's at, where we need to be investing. Adam, had your milk. It's awesome. All the burgers were wonderful out there. And I have altered my diet because of health reasons and tried vegetarian, vegan, blah, blah, blah. Friend pressure, everything. It's delicious.
You're going to get
I love
me
it.
in real trouble if you don't get to your question.
But where I heard this morning you made the case for, first you're making a great product, but then you made the case for why it's good. With 80% of the land being used, the greenhouse gases with land-based livestock production, blah, blah, blah. Would you speak to that?
Yeah, my approach is that I think that there are a lot of environmental impacts of our current food system. If we can create great food with a lot lower impact, we're going to be a lot better off. And it's really just that simple.
I agree with that.
We're good?
We've got to end. You can take questions individually.
But I promised this woman I would let her ask her question.
Follow up on the leadership, the question of leadership, and most of the publicity about big business is bad. Like they avoid taxes, they offshore, they overpay CEOs, etc. And as leaders, do you feel you have a responsibility to speak out as your voices, make your voices heard on some of these issues we really don't hear from corporate leaders?
Yeah.
I mean, we heard from Warren Buffett about taxes, but where are the voices of the CEOs on some
I
of
think
these
that's
issues?
changing, by the way. I hear much more of it today than I did 10 years ago.
The amount of time that we spend on this topic is significant. Significant.
You look at what just happened in North Carolina.
Significant.
never would have happened 10 years ago. That an issue like that, everybody would have been hiding under their desk. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we speak out selectively on stuff that we can, and that you don't want to just use your voice if it's not. But you know, the fact that some companies pay hardly any tax, particularly some of these large manufacturing, it just burns me. I'm like, you know, you got the best system in the world. You're using it. You ought to pay tax. You ought to just write a damn check.
Don't mess around. You want to name names?
I
can
don't
name
need
a couple.
today.
Yeah, okay, you got to be really quick.
I'm super fast. Jason Primo, Aspen Fellow, South Carolina. Continuing the same genre, companies do have a bad rap, especially amongst kids and millennials. One sentence pitch. What are you going to give a motivating sentence to today's high school kids that they can go to work and do good in the world?
You can come to work for Xerox and do good in the world. And by the way, we can show you every day employees who do it. Just come walk around, talk to our people, go to work every day, great living, and do good.
Yeah, if you're not in that place, change jobs.
By the way, I agree with that totally.
I'll
Find another place to work.
I'll just tell you what I tell the kids when I do the We Days, believe in yourself.
Yeah. Hey, Rockstar panel, big round of applause, please. Thank you.